Cześć, dzień dobry. Today I will show you how I set up my every mixing sessions before I even start mixing in the first place. So today we are going to use the session of my band, which is called Tides from Nebula. We are playing some kind of a post-rock instrumental stuff. I believe it's very well recorded, so it's a perfect representation of what I would do before the mixing process. My DAW of choice is Pro Tools, but you can apply this workflow to any other DAW, so don't worry about it. All the DAWs basically works the same these days. So this session is pretty big because we were using variety of sounds, mostly guitar sounds, a lot of tracks to record one instrument, but don't worry, we're gonna make it much simpler. Okay, so the first thing I'm always doing is to create the mix bus, which is basically an auxiliary track, which I'm basically putting all the signal from all the other auxes, which I'm gonna discuss a bit later. Let me quickly show you why do I need this mix bus track. Let's say I am just working on my mix and my mix is being affected by, let's say, this EQ. I'm just dipping a lot of mid-range, low mid-range. And in this particular case, if I would do that here on a mix bus, if I would like to listen to my reference track, it also would be affected by this EQ. To avoid that, I'm just creating additional aux, so I'm avoiding actually doing anything on my master chain, so my reference tracks, which are going straight to the master, are being clean. So how to work with such a huge session? It is actually quite simple. You just have to think by instruments, not by the track. So for example, we have a drum set which is being recorded by 22 tracks, but if you think about it, it's a drum set, right? It's drums. Put everything into one group, then you have one instrument. Of course, you have to tweak most of the individual tracks, but it just makes things visually more simple. So what I'm doing with every instrument is I'm just color coding it. In this case, I'm using red color for drums, and I'm also creating groups. So if I'm just clicking solo, it's just solo whole group of tracks, which just combined makes the whole drum set. So I'm soloing it right now, and here we go. You hear only drums. Then I'm doing basically the same thing with every other instrument. Here is the bass guitar, which is pretty complicated. As for the bass guitar, it's like 5 tracks. I admit it's a bit overkill for a bass guitar. One stack is a Fender Super Bassman, and second stack is an Ampeg SVT, and also of course DI box, which is crucial to the bass sound. And here it is. Here is the group of percussion stuff, and it's also being sent to the separate aux. The same thing applies to all the keyboard instruments. Then there is this orange-brown section, which is the world of guitars. I know it's a lot, but if you have a look here, it's not that I'm recording like 20 guitars all the time. It's about the sounds. It's just make the mixing process much easier because you're just looking at one sound of the guitar. Here is the second sound of the guitar. Here is the third sound of the guitar. So if you apply some mixing here to this track, let's say, it will just be very well translated to also this part. Every guitar part has its own aux. Let's say this rhythm guitar, and this middle guitar, and then all these tracks are being sent to this mix bus, which I talked about in the very beginning of this video. So if I'll mute the mix bus, it should be silent. right. This method just allows me to work on group of instruments or just mute one big chunk of tracks at once. Let's say I'm listening to the whole mix, but I want to mute bass guitar. I'm just clicking one button and it's off. Or drums. Also, the thing which makes your life as a mixer much easier is to work on auxes. So let's say I have a drum set, and of course lower mid-range in every drum set, rough drum set, is a bit problematic. So my first move on the EQ is probably to just cut a bit of low mids. And it's much simpler to do this move on all the tracks at once than on each particular track. Same thing with the compression. For example, I have the API 2500. And here it is, much more roomy, snappy sound in like 10 seconds. One thing which I'm always doing almost in the very beginning when I have my routing ready, I'm just applying the compression on my mix bus. Most of the times it's the simple SSL compressor which should be working slightly, maybe 1-2 dB. It's like a basic clue, and remember to check it pretty often, because when you're doing some mixing on the way, you might send a bit less or a bit more of a signal to the mix bus. You just have to be careful and adjust this compressor from time to time during your mixing process. Of course, as you can see, my faders are already pretty well set up. That's another topic that's a part of gain staging. If you're interested in such a episode, just let me know in a comment. Sometimes, like in these situations, I would also add additional auxes on drum set, 2 mono tracks. One is for kick and one is for snare drum, just to blend all the mics from kick and from the snare and then mix it on the aux. So for example, I have this sound on a kick, and instead of just mixing each track individually, I'm just sending in the right proportion the tracks to the kick aux and then mix it from here. It is a part of top-down mixing method, which I am a big fan of, but it's a topic for another episode.